All right. Hey, good morning. Normally we do these in the afternoon, but good morning. And welcome to the International Code Council Code Official Spotlight. We are being brought to you today, right now, on Facebook Live, but this will be later posted to YouTube and also our podcast platform, ICC Region 1 Radio. So if you're not necessarily catching this live and you're catching this as we are discussing, great. Provide us some questions, comments, some feedback. We always love that. But today, or first, I'm welcoming you to Region 1, the Facebook platform. If you're watching this live, Region 1 was established in 2014, and we're made up of 3 states: California, Hawaii, and Nevada. This also includes 32 chapters within the ICC region, and we actually have one of those chapter presidents with us today. We're dedicated to excellence in education and engagement to promote a safer environment by bringing individuals together. This discussion forum was designed to highlight individuals within the various chapters that make up our region. And today we have joining us Rick Rozier, Deputy Fire Marshal with Las Vegas Fire and Rescue and President of the Fire Prevention Association of Nevada. Thank you, Rick, for joining us. If you have any questions for Rick, please feel free to share them in the comments. We'll be checking those as time goes on, and just let us know, and we'll definitely ask Rick, or if you have questions for me, hopefully I can answer them as well. If you would like to be a guest in one of our upcoming forums or have any suggestions for others, I'm always looking for people. So if not, you'll be getting an email or a phone call from me to try to get you to participate. But please send us a message. We would like to have you on this spotlight. So with that, welcome, Rick.
Thank you for having me, Tim. I appreciate the invite and look forward to having a good discussion.
Yeah, I've been to Vegas a couple times, so not really a lot, but it's always good to talk to people that live there and have had some experiences. Very unique from a fire protection standpoint, and so I think that I'll probably have a lot of questions, especially when it comes to some of the unique challenges that you guys face in that area. So with that being said, can you share a little bit about your background and really the area that you serve within the city?
Actually, I'll start with the department. I work for Las Vegas Fire and Rescue in the capacity as a Deputy Fire Marshal, which means I run our Fire Prevention Division under the guidance of the Fire Marshal Deputy Chief. We are a full-service fire department here in Las Vegas. We obviously have suppression activity. We do provide fire prevention, public education, paramedicine for all of our residents. We have the only regional bomb squad in our department. We have a hazmat unit as well as a technical rescue team. So we are full service. We also house the Combined Communications Center, which is our dispatch office, which serves Clark County Fire Department, North Las Vegas Fire Department, and our department as well under our roof. Our city is about 670,000 strong. Ironically enough, a lot of people associate Las Vegas with the Strip, which is not actually in the city of Las Vegas. It's an unincorporated Clark County. So the city of Las Vegas doesn't do any inspection-related activities or enforcement-related activities at all on the Las Vegas Strip. Our big casino corridor would be downtown, which is Fremont Street and a lot of the downtown casino area. We have 6 wards within the 136 square miles of our city. We are an ISO Class 1 department. We are working on getting accredited by CFAI. We had it at one point, lost it, and are in the process of getting it back, hopefully. We operate 21 fire stations spread out pretty evenly across the town. We've got roughly 660 full-time staff members. Obviously, we have a fire prevention division, which is about 25 strong, starting with the fire marshal. We do our plan reviews in-house. We've got 15 area inspectors, which are housed in fire stations, which is kind of a cool thing that we do. That way it increases the level of communication between our suppression crews and the inspection division. We also have one person that we've dedicated to what we call our single family risk reduction program, which is our smoke alarm program. It kind of took off once we started it, so we had to dedicate a full-time staff member to meeting the needs of that program. And then we've also dedicated a full-time employee to our public education and outreach efforts. Because again, once we started doing all those projects, it took off and we needed someone to help us with that coordination. As far as my background goes, I would say I'm a lifetime resident of Las Vegas. I wasn't really born here, but I've lived here for the better part of 40 years. Went to high school here, went to UNLV as my college. Right out of college, I started in the insurance industry as an adjuster with State Farm. The career lasted about 9 years, and amongst other things, I was on their national catastrophe team, in which I traveled across the country with a group, and we went to places where natural disasters, floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and then usually when that happens, that area gets inundated with claims, so they bring in teams from across the country to help with that overflow of claims. I started with the city of Las Vegas in 2003 as a fire inspector. About 10 years later, I was promoted to supervisor, and about 5 years after that, I was promoted to deputy fire marshal, which is the current rank that I hold. About 3 years ago, we have in California, you guys call it an FPO, Fire Prevention Officers Association. We call it here the Fire Prevention Association of Nevada. It is a statewide organization of about 200 strong, which includes, I believe, 30 departments, if not more, some industry professionals, and everything in between. We invite anybody who wants to be a member to be a member. We hold a meeting about every 2 months. The pandemic started us down the path of the virtual meeting, which actually has been a nice, pleasant surprise because, travel time has been reduced to nothing to get to meetings. The meetings last between 45 minutes and an hour, and we cover everything from fireworks enforcement during the 4th of July holiday to code adoptions when they come down the pipe. We have interpretations committees, which we try to stay consistent across the board wherever possible. We do some education with the association. We have a youth fire setter program that we house through the association, and that's really about it.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot. I'm actually pretty excited to hear your different community risk reduction efforts. Like you mentioned, having the dedicated staff, especially with community risk reduction, your smoke alarm projects, and that program in and of itself, I'm sure is a major undertaking, especially for a city the size of Las Vegas, and then also having somebody that's just dedicated solely to public education and developing curriculum and being able to educate the community more on fire and life safety. Speaking of that, FTE for the smoke alarm program, is that their primary role, or do they also engage in other community risk reduction efforts, anywhere from maybe fall prevention and maybe team up a bit with your folks in public education?
Well, it's a group effort amongst the entirety of our staff. Basically, the program started as, let me back up a little bit. A few years ago, we were in the battle to try to get residential sprinklers. And we got a chief in from Southern California to be our fire marshal to kind of help guide us through that process. And what he brought was the mindset of community risk reduction, that it's got to be something that's an overarching theme within your department. It's not just we're going to ask for residential sprinklers. It has to be part of a bigger plan.
Right.
So what we did was that we explained to the home builders and to our elected officials that, majority of the fires that we have in our valley are related to where people live and sleep and things like that. They're in residences. So we started our smoke alarm policy to assist with the older building stock that we had across the valley, because again, the smoke detection with the lack of sprinklers is your best defense. And then we addressed the newer building stock that's being built, and this town is ever expanding with the residential sprinkler ordinance that was, at the end of the day, it was hand in hand with the building folks, with our Home Builders Association. They actually were supportive at the very end. We had an MOU. Our planning department really helped a lot with that process as well. But we felt it was a better strategy to make the sprinkler ordinance part of a bigger strategy, which is we inspect apartments now more than we ever did. We have the smoke alarm policy that we didn't have before. We will install smoke alarms at no charge at any of the residences that don't have them. We will check the ones that do have them for compliance and make sure they fall within the NFPA standards.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sprinkler ordinance fits right into that program. So, bringing that community risk reduction philosophy in really helped us a lot with getting that ordinance passed.
That's outstanding. I like how you guys really tackled it from a holistic approach, really not just say, we're going to segregate this and we're going to go and we're going to, take a look at the fire sprinkler portion. We'll get that implemented. And then we'll go into this and we'll get that implemented. As you mentioned, really community risk reduction is more about identifying the overwhelming risk. And I think you highlighted it. You have had most of your fires in residential occupancies. And in those residential occupancies, yeah, those are typically where we have they're more devastating, right? We may have some injuries and some other things that may happen within those fires, and so how do we best mitigate those? And at the end, we'll talk a bit about stakeholders, but that's a great ability to engage your stakeholders. And how do we go from where we're at now to implementing this overall strategy and all these pieces in between, and being able to engage those stakeholders for them to be able to provide input to be able to help develop that policy. And it's good to hear that you guys have residential sprinklers. I know for me, in my jurisdiction here in Northern California, we've had residential sprinklers, I want to say, since 2011. And I will say that we do have an occasional fire in those now sprinkled, single-family homes. And what we're finding is that it is doing a really good job extinguishing the fire. Now, it still causes some damage, absolutely. It's more of a life safety system than it is anything else, but it's really helped us. And so it's great to hear that you guys have definitely gone that route and taken on that multi-pronged approach.
Yeah, it's been really helpful for us. And to go back to your original question with regards to that full-time employee, the way that we set up our smoke alarm program, the smoke alarm was the way to get us in the door, because obviously we don't do inspections on single-family residences like most of the people across the country. But it was a way for them to invite us into their home. And while we're there, let's take the opportunity to look for the risks and educate them while we're there. So the sizzle of the program was, let's figure out what can go wrong in your home while we're installing the smoke alarm over here, and point out some cooking safety ideas, maybe some slip and fall risks, some prescription drug abuse type things, to where, maybe we can give them some advice to get ahead of the 911 call potentially that might be coming in the future. Mm-hmm. So we do ask the rest of our staff to participate, and there is a nice partnership between the person that's designed to do our public education coordination and then that person who's doing the smoke alarm installations. We have engaged a lot of community members as well. We've got some fire alarm companies, some electricians that have helped along the way. They've donated their time. They've done blitz days with us where we've gone into different communities and installed the smoke alarms at no cost. So we've really taken an overarching approach to getting safety into the homes, where, a lot of people find that roadblock that I can't get in the homes. How do I do this? How do I get the message in? And we found that the smoke alarms have been a great conduit to getting us into the homes.
That's fantastic. Now, I would imagine that through this process, it wasn't something that I don't want to say, because for me, it's been a challenge sometimes identifying the best method, right? We understand that we have a risk, and then how do we implement those strategies? And how did you, from that identifying that risk and working with your stakeholders, can you walk us through maybe that process, how you went from recognizing the risk to implementing or developing this program, and some of those different things that maybe, I don't want to say are pitfalls for some of us that are, working in community risk reduction, because I know there are challenges. Sometimes it is overwhelming. Like, how do I address it, and what do I do to be able to address that risk?
Well, with us, everything with CRR starts with that community risk assessment. You got to know where your risks are. You got to know where your fires are. I've also, as part of my many hats, I've been the state representative at the Vision 2020 conference, which happens every couple of years, and that's been really eye-opening, because it's not just about one aspect of. We all think that fires happen all over the place, but in reality, if you look at your numbers, you might be surprised about where your fires are actually happening. And for us in Las Vegas, it's even worse than that. Is probably 95% of our calls are medical. So our next big plan is to try to figure out how to get ahead of the medical calls. Going back to your original question, with the smoke alarm program, we did just a cursory evaluation of our numbers, and it was just very, very evident that our fire problem is in residences. And in single-family residence, it was about 50-50 with multifamily residents. So it was apartments or homes. They were happening almost exclusively in those areas. So we kind of looked at it and looked at ideas. We looked at model programs across the country. I learned a lot at the First Vision 2020 conference I went to. Everybody's got a smoke alarm program, so that was kind of the low-hanging fruit. We saw a couple of presentations over there about the multifamily inspection program, so we started that as well. And it was kind of eye-opening because our folks were going in and, we were looking for standard violations and finding that, buildings in most cases don't start fires. It's usually the people within those buildings and their behaviors and their actions that cause the fires. So both teams were out there talking to folks and, we were trying to find reasons to get in. Like I said, with the single-family residents, it was through the apartment or through the smoke alarm program. Obviously, we have more of a nexus to get into a multifamily residence through a required inspection. Even though the state in Nevada doesn't mandate them, we were just going in there and saying, we want to inspect your place, talk to your residents, and we found everything from commercial kitchens to repair garages.
Oh, wow.
We found, it's amazing how much stuff people can pile in. We found hoarding situations. We found people leaving burning candles during the day, smoking materials piled up on the floor. We found people who have it was a picket fence that they installed over their bedroom window because they wanted to keep the kids inside the bedroom. So they've just basically taken out their secondary point of egress. So,
right.
Bars on windows that don't have release mechanisms. It was really, really eye-opening, all the problems that we ended up discovering and potential disasters that we averted with our inspection program. Pitfalls, obviously when you start doing something you haven't done in a long time or ever, you've got the pushback. You've got the pushback from the Apartment Owners Association and things like that. So we've agreed to do educational programs for the apartment owners. We tell them that our focus isn't necessarily to beat you guys up. It's to get to the root of the problem. And we showed them a lot of the problems that are with their tenants and that they were willing to have conversations with those tenants. And they were really, at the end of the day, they supported our efforts 100%. So, it is important to get with your stakeholders, as you mentioned, to talk to them about, your approach and try to make it about positive education and not about enforcement, although that is an option if you need to.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, education is really a key piece of what we're trying to accomplish and how do we best accomplish that. And as you mentioned, engaging those apartment owners and property management companies to have that discussion and highlight some of those common fire code violations that you've identified. And it is kind of scary to see some of those things that, as you mentioned, anywhere from operating a commercial kitchen to bars on windows, where you've now rendered that secondary means of egress or escape, that rescue opening, blocked and locked, and now we can't get people out. And so it's amazing. Here in the state of California, we have, and I'm sure we have the state mandated occupancies that we have to inspect, and one of those is the residential occupancies, and we do our best to get into all those, especially those R2s and even our R1s, just because we do identify that that is a risk. People are most vulnerable when they're sleeping. And so how do we best address that risk? And so I will say that it is one of those, that we emphasize quite a bit. So, no, that's great to hear. You mentioned Vision 2020, and those provide great resources for, people that are in community risk reduction. And I know that a lot of people share some of those different programs that they've implemented. I was also talking with Robert Marshall with the San Mateo Consolidated Fire Department in the Bay Area, and he hit on the same thing about the community risk assessment. That's key, because how many fires do you actually have, and where are those fires going to be found? And it will likely surprise you as you start looking at the numbers. And I know that a lot of these new record management systems are starting to kind of help with that and develop tools for fire prevention and community risk reduction departments. So.
We're fairly lucky here that we've had a pretty robust system for tracking fires and tracking incidents and things like that. It's not perfect. We're constantly working to make it better, but I think that we've been really fortunate to have access to that data. Not everybody seems to across the country. We have a pretty well-funded department, so we've had IT support and things like that that'll help us gather that data. But like I mentioned before, it was just glaring. It really didn't take much digging to find where our fire problem was. So I think once we get a handle on this, which we're nowhere near that at this point, it'll be interesting to see where the next problem presents itself.
So we talk about, as we're talking about the data, since you've implemented these strategies, how much of a reduction have you seen in the overall, I don't say fire problem, but more of those statistics that you're tracking as part of that assessment?
It's real difficult because it's really hard to track a fire that never happened.
Right.
But it's been really short term. We've only been doing this for a couple of years now, so
Okay.
long-term statistics aren't really available to see what impact our programs have had. And to combat things, we've had COVID for the last 2 years, which forced a lot of people inside and forced a lot of people to start cooking, which resulted in more cooking fires than we really ever had before, at least from my recollection. So the fire numbers have gotten skewed just a little bit. So it's really hard to make a really good determination of the impact of our programs. But we are ever looking, and we're always looking for outcomes that we can track. Ironically enough, I'm going to the Fire Academy, leaving tomorrow to take a class on methodologies for evaluating the effectiveness of your programs, which is always a tough one because it's easy to track how many inspections you did or how many people you met or how many smoke alarms you installed. But the key is to try to figure out the impact of that work that you've done, and that's the key to all CRR programs, is to figure out, are you being effective? Do you need to make an adjustment on the fly? Has your program solved the problem effectively to where you can move on to the next one? So I'm going to be real interested to see what they come up with at that class.
Yeah, that's actually, I've not taken that class. I've been to the Fire Academy on a couple occasions, and I'll be interested to see what metrics are available, because you hit on something that's really hard to quantify, is how do you measure a fire that never happened? And we always talk about, inspection numbers. Well, but how do you quantify that, especially for when we get into those times where tough budgetary times, and we're trying to demonstrate our program's worth and what we're doing and how effective we're being. And I think that's always one of those things, is we're outcome based and we're metric based. Like, outcomes are great, we have less fires, but also we're also addressing other things when we come out and do those fire inspections. We're talking about fire and life safety hazard. There are other things that we identify, as it relates back to those inspections, especially with hazardous materials inspections. Those are another, big component of what we do. One of the things that I do want to talk to you about is, you mentioned it when you in your introduction, talking about the path from being on the disaster response team for State Farm, and now into your role as the Deputy Fire Marshal for the City of Las Vegas. Can you describe maybe some experiences that you've had that have helped shape your vision as it relates back to fire and life safety and fire code enforcement?
Well, it's a tough one. As far as my State Farm experience, as an adjuster, you see the failures in the system, if you will. You see the fires, because you're only called upon when there's a disaster of some kind. Somebody's house catches on fire, somebody's house gets flooded, those types of things. And I've always had the desire and the commitment to helping. I don't know where it came from, why I have it, but I always enjoy helping people. And it was a natural thing in the insurance business, because you're in you get called on their worst day. Something bad has happened, you can help get them whole. It was a natural progression into fire inspecting, because at that point I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe I can prevent that worst day from happening by doing a quality inspection, by having that educational conversation with the owner of the building or the business or the homeowner or the apartment renter, those people, to where maybe I can catch those problems that would result into a fire later on and make it to where it didn't happen. And it doesn't always work out that way. We've had some fires here, obviously, in the recent past, but we do our best to try to prevent them. And I think that's really one of the situations I can call out. I know what happens at the end. If something doesn't stop that cycle from happening, there's no intervention, now you have an insurance claim because you've had a fire or something like that. So if we can avoid that, that's kind of our goal, and that's how I've played it since I got here.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think that most of us that get into this career, we have that desire to help people. And as you mentioned, having been a fire investigator and seeing the outcomes of how maybe fire code violations and those types of things can definitely, one, impact the progression of the fire, but also cause that fire, and being able to prevent that from happening. That's always been my goal as well. And I think that, a lot of us in the fire prevention industry have that ultimate desire to help people, and how do we best help people? And I think that makes us, better for it, right? I think that, having those values to be able to help emphasize that is always a good thing. So, now, you've been in the industry quite a while, like myself. There's been a lot of changes. I'm going to be honest, anywhere from pen and paper inspections to now digital tablets to even video-based inspections. But what are some of the biggest changes you've seen that, definitely have impacted your career?
Yeah, I think you covered it. When I first started, everything was pen and paper. I had an accordion-style folder with my come-out stuff that I had to go do that day. Now everything is computer-based, and maybe I'm old, but I don't know that that's made things better, because it seems like our technology doesn't always live up to its billing. You got downtime, you've got Wi-Fi connections and problems, and all that. But seriously, I think that the biggest change that I've seen, at least in our department, has been the community risk reduction approach.
Mm-hmm.
Before, and I call it our grandfather's fire prevention, it was all about just inspecting. Let's go inspect a building. No reason, just because they inspected it last year and we're going to inspect it again this year. I think with the community risk reduction process, hopefully everything that you do has a reason. If you've got limited resources, which everybody does, it's a better use of those resources, and I think it's a better use of your time in general. Why go into that doctor's office that really isn't a hazard when that same 30-minute inspection could be spent at an apartment complex or maybe somewhere else. So I think that's the biggest change, because when I started, that wasn't even mentioned. It was never even a thought process. But now, over the last several years, it's become more and more an integral part of our department, and not just in prevention, in suppression as well. Our department has a nurse hotline now, to where people call in, and maybe if they can get talking to a nurse as opposed to having a rescue role on the call, that saves a call. Maybe we've got community paramedicine folks, so they drive in a vehicle, and they can also go to some of these places that we seem to go to frequently and save that rescue from having to leave the house and maybe be available for a more serious call. So we've taken it seriously across the board in trying to reduce call volume, trying to educate people on proper 911 use and things like that. So I think that's the biggest change, and I hope that's the one that sticks around for a long time.
Yeah, having like what you just said, and this is something that I've been having a discussion with my staff, is new business inspections are essential. I understand, but how do we focus that? How do we take that flashlight and focus it elsewhere, and really, create it to be a spotlight and address those issues and those challenges that we're facing? And we have a very finite list of resources or available resources, and then how do we shift that to other areas that we are going to have a much greater impact? And you even mentioned one that was huge, and I think that a lot of people are going to this paramedicine, but even having a nurse on call to be able to have, let's say they have a medication question and they can't get a hold of their doctor. It's after hours and they're trying to get a hold of somebody. To be able to have that conversation in lieu of having that same person now, take the wrong thing or do the wrong thing and end up having, call for service, and how do you mitigate that? And that definitely is, I think we're kind of more of an all hazards, and it really fits back into community risk reduction. Really, at the end is we look at the overall totality of those circumstances and try to develop those strategies. And it sounds like you guys are definitely very progressive when it comes to some of those areas where you've identified some challenges.
Yeah, I'd like to think that we run a pretty progressive department under Chief Buchanan. In prevention, we are always looking for a better way to do things,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's electronic plan review, whether it's, like you said, if there's any kind of way we can do an inspection using a drone or something like that. Anything we can think of or a contractor or somebody can think of to make life easier and make things smoother, we're willing to try. We don't really close the door on too much. We're willing to give it a shot. If it doesn't work, we'll pivot and try something else. But as far as the risk reduction, you hit it right on the head. That's what we should all be focusing on, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's a better and smarter use of our resources.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we talk about a lot about community risk reduction and some of those things, but also too, how do you engage as being the president of the Fire Prevention Association of Nevada? How do you engage with those folks maybe throughout the state or even in other states? You talk about Vision 2020 and those, but how do you really network and be able to develop you as a code enforcement or a code official?
For a majority of my career, I didn't do much networking. I was in my little inspection area. I was happy doing my thing. But as I've progressed up through the ranks, I've tried to put myself and our department out there a little bit more. I've participated in the CRR symposiums with Vision 2020. As the FPAM president, I've tried to bring the north and the south of the state, which, if you've ever seen Nevada, it's Reno, it's Las Vegas, and there's really not a whole lot in between. There's a lot of dead space where there's just a lot of desert and whatnot. So there's two big population centers, and they're 7 hours driving distance apart. So there's not a lot of opportunity for us to get together. But we've merged our training. We've got some great resources to bring some training into the state. We've tried to partner with as many organizations. I partner with the Southern Nevada ICC chapter, and they host an EduCode program once a year for training. We've got a member on that committee to help with development of a fire prevention track. So I'm doing what I can. I've also been personally on the NFPA2 committee for developing that credential. I stepped away about a year ago, and one of my staff members now took my place. So we had somebody from our department that is part of that development process for that the NFPA2 certification. So we're trying to get as many people involved in stuff. We run the Youth Fire Center program, even though it's through our association. It is a Las Vegas Fire and Rescue member that runs it for the southern part of the state, coordinates it. We brought some NFA courses out here to teach more folks about youth fire setting intervention. So we are trying to stay as national as we can. And still kind of focus on what we got going on here. I don't want to look elsewhere but ignore something here, but we are trying to put ourselves out there and meet as many people. And, for anybody who's not been to the National Fire Academy, that is an excellent way to network. I've gone to a couple of classes, and the people that you meet in those classes are like-minded individuals. They all want to learn. They all want to expand their knowledge base. I've got people that I've been calling for 10 years now, since the first time I went to the academy, that I still bounce stuff off, all the time. So it's a great way to network and meet people that share your beliefs and opinions on the fire prevention division stuff.
Yeah, I talk highly about the National Fire Academy as well. I think that if you're looking for some training, one, it's free. So yeah, other than having to buy your meal ticket, you are able to get some of the best training out there. And I think that they do a lot to stay relevant, too. I mean, that's one of those things that they explore a lot of different, different things. And I think that they do as good a job as any organization to train code enforcement professionals, fire and building, and I think that if you haven't been there, highly recommend it. Be able to sit around amongst your peers, have those conversations, and really see how people are doing it elsewhere throughout the country. And it definitely helps. And as you mentioned, being able to bounce things off of other people. And hey, I've encountered this, and how do I? What have you done to, address it in your area? And it provides a good kind of a sounding board sometimes. I will say that I've kind of also felt as well. How do you connect with the International Code Council, with this being the Code Official Spotlight for Region 1? How do you connect? You mentioned EduCode, and I'm sure Sam Palmer, our president with Region 1, is going to be happy to hear that. But how do you connect with the International Code Council as a whole?
Well, I up until I became the president, I really didn't have much contact other than going to the EduCode conferences. But since becoming the president, we've got a committee report that we leave open for both NFPA and ICC. And Susan Dowdy has been our liaison, and she's been phenomenal. If you've never met Susan, she every meeting she comes ready to go with great reports. I personally had to bounce stuff off of her. She always comes through with a great answer about credentialing, about anything related to ICC, their code books, anything like that. She's been an outstanding resource for us in the Fire Prevention Association, and along with Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. So I think I've got a great working relationship with her, and I can't be happier. We submit reports. She actually put me in touch with another group, and their name escapes me right now. I've attended a couple of their meetings online, and I've learned about some of the resources that I didn't even know were available through ICC. I mean, they even offer support. We just spent a bunch of money putting together a website for our association and didn't realize that service was available through ICC. Could have saved us a bunch of money and probably given us just as good as a product as we ended up paying for. But
Right.
live and learn.
Yeah, she is a valuable resource, and if you're not familiar with Susan, we can definitely put you in contact, because I will say that she, since being on the board as the treasurer of Region 1, she has been an outstanding resource, and like you mentioned, coming to the different chapter meetings and sharing information, like for your Fire Prevention Association, even our Fire Prevention Officers Association. She's very active and definitely shares a lot of information, anywhere from different contacts to even grant programs. I know that she was also helping with some of those FEMA grants, and so she is an outstanding resource. And I will say that everybody that I've ever dealt with at the ICC has been one of those that have had the utmost professionalism and been able to kind of help through that process, and being able to see a lot of them as we went to the annual conference there in Pittsburgh. So I was disappointed not to see it in Vegas this year, but as it was a couple years ago. But because it's a lot closer for me to go to Vegas than it is to go to Pittsburgh. I spent a lot of time in the airport, and I don't like to travel a whole heck of a lot, but I would like to have maybe a shorter flight from time to time. So, so we talk about, like, as you mentioned, some of the things that how you stay involved, going to NFA, talking with, going to the Vision 2020 conferences, but how else do you try to really stay up on the latest and greatest as it relates back to maybe the code standards and even community risk reduction?
Well, with regards to the codes, our association is actually responsible for code adoptions for Southern Nevada. And we've got 4 different jurisdictions here, 4 predominant jurisdictions. We've got littler ones, but it's North Las Vegas, Henderson, and Clark County. And the 4 of us will get together in a room, every code cycle and talk about changes and updates and things, propose code amendments, things like that. Most of the Valley is on a 6-year code cycle. We and Henderson are on a 3-year code cycle, so we adopt every code cycle that comes out. So that kind of gets us current as we go through the book to determine, if we're going to amend anything locally or regionally with the current IFC or IBC, because we're also partnering with our building official folks, with SNOBO, with our Southern Nevada Building Officers Committee, who also does the building adoption. So that's about how we stay current with the codes, standards. Same thing. At the same time, you have to look at the standards to see how they marry up with the codes, just to make sure you're not kind of crossing paths the wrong way. Other than that, going to the EduCode process, and the good thing about that, there's always a class on changes with the code, changes coming up, those types of things that keep you current. So other than that, not a whole lot.
Well, I think that you hit on a lot, so I don't think that's not a whole lot. I know that your day is probably very similar to mine. I attend a lot of meetings and have a lot of discussions with a lot of people,
Oh
And
boy.
so I keep a lot of notes, and sometimes you have to take those opportunities to try to stay current. And it sounds like you do a really good job with it, and also seeking training anywhere from EduCode to NFA and even Vision 2020. And I've been to EduCode once. It's probably been 3 or 4 years now, but I will say, like, as you mentioned, having the code update class is always a valuable thing to see what's coming in and what's been changed. I sit on our Fire Prevention Officers Association Building and Fire Code Advisory Committee, and to work through that process of the code development cycle and visit with different folks on, different code proposals. And it's interesting to kind of see that dynamic and what their rationale or reasoning is for those code changes. And being able to see that has always been fun. I mean, that for me has been a highlight, at least because then I can see what might be coming down the pipe, especially like and if you haven't voted yet, you need to vote by November 1st. And just kind of a public service announcement as it relates back to the government online consensus voting that is going on right now as part of the code adoption process for the 2024 International Fire and Building Codes. And so if anybody needs some assistance with that, feel free to reach out to anybody at Region 1. We'd be happy to help with that. But that is one of those processes, and seeing some of the new codes that are coming into play and some of the changes that were proposed that may not made it, but we might see in 2028, right? Or not 2028, 2027. Yeah, and so seeing that, to be able to see, and how long it takes 3 years to get through this process to make sure that what goes in there is going to be a valuable resource for everybody that's going to, fully implement it and address those risks. So we kind of talked about it, and I kind of wanted to go back to it. Code enforcement is really the sum of many parts, and you hit on accreditation, and I've been in an organization that was going through accreditation, and we did achieve that accreditation. How does the Fire Prevention Bureau Community Risk Reduction, how does that fit into that accreditation process?
Well, ironically enough, I believe I've not seen the latest version of the FESM document, but I believe it's moving more towards a community risk reduction based reporting methodology. The last one we submitted, I want to say, was the 8th or 9th version. I can't remember. And we talk about the different fire prevention inspection practices, and then public education are the two main items that I had to report on. Ironically enough, the last time we went through a peer site review, it was about 3 or 4 years ago when we were deferred, and I had a great meeting with a gentleman from Indiana, and he talked to us about our programs. That was very eye-opening to think we're doing a good job and all the things that we're trying to accomplish, but then having some eyes from the outside take a look at it and say, hey, you could be doing this a little bit better. You're not meeting this expectation here. So why don't you look at maybe that expectation being altered a little bit to where when you report on it, it looks a little bit more favorable. So that process, I highly recommend it, because it really does give you a good perspective on how your organization as a whole is performing and how you can improve, because that's what it's all about. Accreditation, it might be a sticker, but at the end of the day, it's a process of constant evaluation and approval and improvement. So that's how we view it, and I took a lot of it to heart, and it has changed the way we do business here.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned it. It's a constant process. It's always evolving. How do we improve, and how do we find our blind spots? I think that having somebody maybe weigh in and evaluate and take a look and provide comments and always is one of the good things, because we may think that we're doing the right thing, for what we're doing, but somebody may have, because like you just mentioned, those evaluators have probably seen a lot of agencies and discussed a lot of things with them, and what may work for them may work for you, but with just some modifications, and going through that process has probably been very refreshing, I bet.
Absolutely. It was a really good experience. Like I said, it was very eye-opening. I think not just for us, but for the whole department, and we're working on it, and we'll be better for it.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Now, we hit on it a little bit with COVID-19, and really COVID-19 and the pandemic has really shaped a different service delivery, and we've all had to adapt how has your department with Las Vegas, how have you adapted to those service delivery challenges that you faced? I know, like for me, I want to say we, as the state of California, were one of the first to kind of shut down a lot of different things, or I don't want to say shut down, but at least put a pause on some things as we waited for some of for some of those signs to catch up and hopefully kind of address some of those things. And we had to, right away implement. We had already been doing digital plan review and online plan reviewing, but we had to increase our efforts on that. But then we started talking about inspections and how do we address that. How has your department kind of changed your service delivery, and really what do you see as maybe a permanent change as you move forward?
Well, I think our department, in terms of plan review, we were kind of headed down the path along with building and safety, the electronic plan review path. It obviously sped things up. We had to make some changes on the fly, some intermittent changes to kind of make it work in the interim. God, I remember a time where we actually, we were still taking paper plans, but then we were scanning them, but then we would have to leave them in like a isolation chamber so they could decontaminate, and then we would, our permit techs would bring them in and scan them. And now we're still in the process. There's some growing pains, but it's I think people like it. It's easier than sending someone down to the building department or to the fire department, having them submit plans. The changes and the corrections can be sent instantaneously, via the system. Everything can be submitted quickly. You get your responses quickly. There's no need to come back and pick them up. Those types of things. So I think that process is here to stay. In fact, I know it's here to stay, and I think that's one of those better processes. I think we'll all be better for. In the inspection side, a little bit more difficult because you kind of have to do an inspection in person. It's harder to do it. There's some things that you might be able to see with a drone, or but we've had those situations where you might say we can't get in, so why don't let's FaceTime and you show me where your extinguisher is. Show me the tag on the extinguisher so I can see that it's current, or on your Ansel system or on your sprinkler system. Those types of things. So we've had to kind of adapt a little bit when it comes to that. We still prefer to have eyes on it when at all possible. But we've had to adapt just slightly a little bit with that. It stopped our smoke alarm program, obviously, because, there were some dangers of going into people's homes.
Right.
On both sides. We are still mandating masks during inspections. I prefer that our staff wear, gloves, if at all possible, just to kind of keep everything clean and safe. But that's been the biggest change is that, before it was kind of just you walk in and you say, hi, I'm here to do your inspection. Now you're masked, you're gloved, you're trying to keep your distance from the folks that you're talking with. Those have been the minor changes. Our numbers are obviously a little bit lower because there was a time like you guys where we actually just shut down most operations. We were trying to keep development going, so we found a way to do the development inspections, but kind of left the maintenance inspections alone for a little bit. We're just now starting to come out of that and go back into businesses, start going back into homes, start going back into apartments, those types of things, to try to restart our programs. But it took a while. I mean, it's been a tough, 18, 19 months.
Yeah. And I think that we're finding that some of these things that we've implemented, as you mentioned, the electronic plan review, are things here to stay. And we continue to, I think we continue to evolve. You even mentioned it's always a constant review of what we're doing and how we achieve those goals. And I think that this pandemic and some of the things that we were faced with definitely now have put it more in the forefront or in our minds to say, hey, we always need to be looking at how to evolve and how to change and how to continue to get better at what we do, instead of maybe thinking about, well, this is the way we've done it, this is the way we're always going to do it. And I've had conversations with people in the past about that, and I'm more, I think you and I are probably very similar in the thinking that change is inevitable. and we have to implement the change when that change is right. We don't make change just to make change, but we make change to hopefully address some of those challenges. And I really try to emphasize that to a lot of folks is like sometimes we just have to. We have to alter the direction and hopefully address those challenges as time goes on. So, well, Rick, I really appreciate your time. I'm looking at the clock, and it's getting close to time for you to catch a flight. But before we end, do you have anything else that you want to add to our conversation? And if anybody has any questions, let me take a look at my list. It looks like we're free and clear of any questions on the message board. And
okay.
but is there anything that you would like to wrap up with and add as we wrap up our conversation?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you and share our story here in the city of Las Vegas. I look forward to logging in and seeing the other ones. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know this existed until you asked me to come on. So I'm really excited to see what other people are doing because, like I said, we're always looking to get better. We're always looking to find other ways, and I'm not proud to say that I've stolen other people's programs. I belong to a lot of email distribution lists. There's a CRR website or email distribution list where people are always asking for, hey, how do you do this? How do you do this better? And if somebody puts something that I like, I don't have any problem taking it and giving them credit. I will give them credit.
Yep.
But you know what? Why reinvent the wheel? If somebody
Absolutely.
can explain to you how to do things and it makes a lot of sense for your organization and your town, take it, use it, run with it, enjoy it, and hopefully it'll make life easier for you.
Yeah, you hit on something that I do too. Is I really think that the fire service is an open source, right? There really should be like a Napster for fire prevention programs, I think. So we can kind of take from, and I think that Vision 2020 does do that a lot because there are a lot of resources on their website. If you haven't been to their, it's strategicfire.org. If you haven't been to their website, make sure to go check that out if you're a fire code official because it provides a wealth of information and programs that are up there, and also points of contact. Like if you don't see something up there, you can definitely reach out to different folks, like Rick Rozier in Spokane Valley. I now being part of the code development process, I know Greg a little bit more, but I knew of him from Vision 2020 and being able to take some of their programs because they're very progressive as it relates back to that as well. So it's a very open source. Maybe we have something here. Maybe we can copyright this Napster for fire prevention and come up with
probably
something.
only a few of us that know what that means left.
I do kind of date myself when I say that. So, because what was that? 2000? It had to have been like 2006, I bet, or 2005.
Yeah, if not a little bit before. Yeah, I think it was in the early 2000s.
Right when the internet really started to kind of take off. I mean, the internet's been around for a while, but really as we started using it more and more. So. With that, Rick, I really do appreciate your time. Yes, and if you haven't checked out our other conversations, folks, we do have, like I said, I have a YouTube. Well, not I. I, as in Region 1, has a YouTube channel where all these conversations are posted. We also have a podcast. So if you want to listen to this on a podcast platform, we're on all major podcast platforms, anywhere from Spotify to Google Podcasts to Apple Podcasts. And a couple others that I'm not familiar with, but you can definitely listen to it there. So if you're looking for maybe something to listen to on your way into work, on your way home from work, give us a listen, and you can listen to folks that are, industry leaders, especially like Rick here in the city of Las Vegas. And I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thanks, Rick. And, stay tuned for our next episodes, folks. We'll definitely be doing more of these as time goes on. So, if you have any suggestions, and I'm going to be, asking Rick if he's got suggestions for other folks that I should reach out to, please send them my way. You can contact us on our social media channels, Facebook. We also have a Twitter account, so feel free to reach out to us there. With that, thank you guys, and Rick, have a good rest of your day, and I really hope that you have a safe travel to the National Fire Academy.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.